Greetings, everyone. Hope all of you are having an absolutely fantastic day. We're back again with King Arthur, Knight's Tale. This time I want to go over Sir Percival, one of my favorite party members in the game, and the character who served as my backup tank during my Righteous Christian playthrough. Let's go over the traits first. So his first trait is Ascetic. He gains 10% XP if vitality was lost during a mission. Very, very interesting. He has Bolsterer, which means if you make him the Master of Faith in the Cathedral, he's going to grant 5 temporary HP to heroes at the start of each mission. And then finally, one of the most brutal negative traits that I've seen in the game, he has Frugal. He can only use 1 potion in the equipment slot. All right, and with that, let's go ahead and go through the abilities. First up is Flaming Strike. Does 100% weapon damage to an adjacent enemy and causes burning for 1 turn. You can upgrade this so that it does more weapon damage, that the duration of the burning effect is increased. It can increase by 50% the weapon damage against the lost. And finally, the AP cost is reduced by 1. But its initial weapon damage is also reduced by 50%. So I think the weapon damage and burning effect upgrades definitely make sense. By the time you get Sir Percival, I think you're around maybe level 10, something like that. The amount of times you face the loss has been significantly reduced. I don't think Undead Bane is really worth it. And Charred Flesh, reducing the weapon damage by 50%, please, no, don't do that. So I would say these 2 upgrades definitely get, and you definitely, of course, want to have this. And I believe he already comes with this selected when you're able to recruit him. Next up is Shield Charge, which allows you to run to an enemy and attacking them, dealing 50% weapon damage and causing knockdown. Monster skill. This allows him to basically manage his AP usage much easier. If you don't have this skill, you see the range is 2 to 6 down at the bottom. If you don't have this skill, you would have to spend 2 to 6 AP to reach the same amount of ground that shield charges are able to do with 1 AP. So definitely pick this up. As far as upgrades, you can increase the weapon damage, you can reduce the cooldown, you can increase the range by 2 tiles. I recommend you get all of this. Final upgrade, if you kill a unit, its cooldown, shield charge cooldown instantly resets. I don't think this is worth it. By the time you get Sir Percival, I feel like unless you're able to select an archer or somebody really weak against melee damage, this is not going to kill the unit you're going up against. And most of the time, you're going to use it against creatures who you want to draw aggro from. So you're going to choose the biggest, meanest person, or at least the person who's in the middle of the big group, so that you can draw all of those nasty attacks and let the other party members do what they are going to do. So Percival is a defender. Next up, Guard. The hero consumes all remaining AP to prepare for a single Overwatch, which can be executed in any direction. In addition, the hero and allies no further than 2 tiles gain 3 armor per 2 AP spent for 1 turn. You can upgrade this where it'll increase the amount of armor hero and allies get, where it'll give 1 AP for the next turn for the hero. The Guard's cooldown can be reduced by 1 turn. And allies are affected by Guard from an additional tile away. You have to use Overwatch attacks a lot as a melee person anyway. So based on that alone, it could be worth it to pick up Guard. I'm not particularly impressed by this ability. It doesn't really do much for me. So I don't bother to kit it out. I do bother to pick it up, the main version, but I don't care about its upgrades. To me, I put them in different places, but you can make your own decision based on your playstyle. Next up is Vengeance. When an enemy hits the hero gains 10% weapon damage against that enemy until the end of the encounter. You can upgrade this where the hero is going to gain 2 AP if they have no HP. The hero starts their turn with 1 AP if they received at least 2 hits during the enemy turn. The less HP the hero has, the more weapon damage the hero deals, and you will deal 30% weapon damage with no HP left. And you can gain 4 unbreakable armor when you have no HP. I do not like selecting abilities that revolve around your character having no HP, especially as a tank. That's absolutely a terrible situation. However, because you are a tank, I think I always recommend that you go ahead and pick this up because it's a free 10% increase for the hero. But also, because you are a tank, I think starting your turn with +1 AP, if you received at least 2 hits during the enemy turn, is probably kind of a no-brainer. It means you're basically always going to start with 1 AP. So you might want to go ahead and pick up these two together. Next up is Strength. It's going to give you 10% more weapon damage. This is a no-brainer. Pick this up. And Pyromania, plus 50% to burning damage. I definitely recommend you pick this up, not only for this skill, but to a skill we're going to get later on down the line. And then Robust. The character gets an additional 10% vitality and 10% HP from accessories, trinkets, and armor sigils. I would say you definitely want to go ahead and pick this up. You want Sir Percival to be as sturdy as possible. On the next slide, you get Taunt. Every enemy within 4 tiles range turns toward the hero and will spend their next turn attacking them. Usually, enemies will not run past melee fighters to get to the back line. They just attack who's in front of them. So if a lot of your team are more so backline fighters and Sir Percival is way in the front drawing a bunch of aggro, this probably isn't that useful. However, if you have more melee fighters, especially champions that are fighting almost side by side with the tank, then this is going to be very, very useful for you. Because if the enemy has a choice between 2 or 3 melee fighters that are all in range, you can't really be sure which person they're going to choose. So it can be very hard to ensure most of the aggro comes towards the tank. But if you use Taunt in this situation, then it's going to ensure no matter how many melee fighters are with him, that all of the aggro comes his way the way you want it to. So in that situation, Taunt is going to be very useful. As far as its upgrades, it can grant you more armor. You can reduce the AP cost. You can increase the range, and you can ensure that enemies affected by Taunt will have their AP reduced by 1. Obviously, if you're going to use Taunt, these are all worthy to pick up. If you're not, then you can ignore this entire kit. Next up is Flurry. It deals 100% weapon damage to 2 adjacent enemies. Target them separately. As far as upgrades, you can gain 30% weapon breaking with Flurry. You can gain 1 AP when killing a unit with Flurry. Flurry can target 1 additional enemy, and you can get an additional 15% weapon damage for Flurry. Now, my issue with Flurry is, let me check something real quick. Okay, so when I look at weapon damage on Sir Mordred, it's 23, right? Weapon damage with Sir Percival is 27. He has a level 20 relic, so he does have upgraded equipment. He doesn't have the best artifacts, but I'm saying all this to say I got Flurry with Sir Mordred and was completely, wholly unimpressed. Like, it never did good enough damage to me for it to be worth picking this up. Now, Sir Percival has just natural increased weapon damage compared to Sir Mordred. So Flurry could be more impressive with him, but I'm going to say offhand that it's just not a skill that I particularly care about or that I feel like is worthwhile to pick up. So I personally would ignore this, but you could go ahead and use it. I mean, it is nice to be able to hit multiple enemies, and he doesn't have cleave the way Sir Mordred gets it. So this is basically your only way to be able to hit up multiple enemies that are surrounding you until you get to this 3rd tile. Next up is Armorer. The hero loses 1 less AP from heavy armor sigils. You absolutely want to pick this up, and I highly recommend also you get the thick skin upgrades, which are both going to increase your armor by 4. There's also upgrades that'll increase your HP by 5% each. If you feel the need to increase your HP, I would recommend you just go ahead and get Robust, which for 2 points is going to give you a 10% increase to vitality and HP, the same way Robust does up here. So that's a much better use of 2 skill points if you feel like he needs to be a little tougher. Next up is Encouragement. Adjacent allies gain 1 AP until the end of their turn. You can reduce the AP cost of encouragement. You can reduce the cooldown. You can make it so that encouragement also gives 2 movement AP to adjacent allies, and you can grant them 20% weapon damage to adjacent allies. So 1 AP for a move, I think that's kind of negligible. But the increase of 20% weapon damage to adjacent allies is a big deal. I think whether or not this is worth it to you depends on how many melee fighters you roll with in the group. If he's going to be surrounded on all sides, then of course this becomes worth it. You can give them an additional AP along with a massive boost and weapon damage, and then let them go out and go to town. If most of your allies are backline fighters, and it would be more difficult for them to step up to you and be in range to get this buff, then I'd say it's probably not worth it. For me, I was always running with a champion, and I had a sage, but my sage is Guinevere, who is melee. So a lot of times I had at least one ally, if not 2, who were in range to be able to get this, and it was worth it for me. Next up is Strong Willed. You get an additional 30% mental debuff resist. This is worth it if you already have some mental debuff that you're just going to add this on to. I feel like you need to have at least 40 to 50% of mental debuff resist in order to really notice that this resist is happening. Anything lower than that, I felt like every time my party members were affected, I was impacted as well. And so it wasn't really worth it. But when you get to that 40 to 50 range, then all of a sudden it becomes a different ball game. Quick note before we get to the last tile. If you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate you hitting the like button. I use this information to figure out what my channel wants to see, and it helps my videos spread to more people. I really appreciate all of the support. Okay, let's move on to the last few abilities. So you have Recuperate. The hero gains 48 temporary HP for 1 level, and the amount of that temporary HP actually increases every other level. As far as upgrades, you can gain armor for the duration. You can gain more temporary HP. You can make the duration last an additional turn, and you can gain 30% mental debuff resist for the duration of this ability. I like this ability as a temporary buff to help strengthen up Sir Percival, but that could just, of course, just be me. As a tank, he should be built to take a lot of damage anyway, and hopefully won't need something like this often, but honestly, it's really nice to have. Next up is All Resistance, which is going to increase your mental and physical debuff resistance by 15%. You can upgrade it so that it does physical debuff and mental debuff by an additional 15%. You can reduce the turn duration of bleeding, burning, and poison. And then finally, you can add 17 vitality to yourself along with 1 injury token. Injury tokens are used to essentially absorb injuries you take during missions. So if enemies are able to remove all of your HP, they'll start hitting your vitality. And if they do too much vitality damage, then you're going to take an injury, which can only be removed by sitting for at least 1 mission in a cathedral. So by having an injury token, it kind of gives you a one-time get out of jail free card during that mission to not take an injury. If you wanted to buff up your mental debuff, then you could take this and then take this and its mental debuff upgrade, and that's going to get you up to 60%. So 60% for mental debuff resist is nothing to sneeze at. For physical, it's only going to give you that 15%. So I would say that's not particularly worth it, but definitely as far as making you more tanky, this is going to do a lot. In addition, block would help make you more tanky significantly as well. The main skill increases block by 5%. You can also increase block by 5% when under the effect of taunt or guard. You can block flanking attacks. So if enemies attack you from the back, it's called a backstab, and they're going to be able to do more damage. You can get items for the tank that turn you to wherever the damage is coming from, which significantly limits how much enemies are able to do for you, or rather do against you. But until that time, this is going to help to protect your back significantly. You get an additional 5% block at full HP. Bonus decreases with HP loss to 0 at 0 HP. And finally, the damage suffered from the first attack of each enemy in an encounter is reduced by 100% if the attack was blocked. So this all applies to your character very, very consistently. Any tank is going to have to pretty much block constantly, whereas physical and mental debuff resistance are situational. You're not being tested on that all the time. So I would argue if you're trying to make your character more tanky, shield block and its upgrades is a better investment than all resistance. Unless there's something specific you're trying to do, like maybe you want to try to make yourself immune to stun or something like that. Then this might fit into your plans more and make yourself closer to what you envision. All right, next up is Immolation. Deals 150% weapon damage to an adjacent enemy and 50% weapon damage to every enemy adjacent with them. As far as upgrades, you can deal 15% more weapon damage on the initial hit. You can reduce the cooldown for Immolation. You can make the ability deal 25% weapon damage against units adjacent with the initial target. And finally, you can cause burning for everyone impacted by Immolation. Obviously, this is a monster ability, allows him to damage a lot of different enemies at the same time. As a tank, he should be drawing enemies from all angles, so you should be able to get plenty of use out of Immolation. I definitely recommend you go ahead and pick this up and upgrade it. Next up is Strength again, and it's going to give you an additional 10% weapon damage. Definitely pick this up. We've got Robust again, same conversation as before. If he's feeling weak, pick it up. If not, you can ignore it. And then finally, Hardened Armor. Reduce armor loss by 20%. This is absolutely a no-brainer serving as your tank. You definitely want him to experience reduced armor damage. So I would definitely recommend you go ahead and pick this up. Honestly, I love Immolation so much and some of the other things that he does that I would argue he's a better tank than Sir Mordred, except for Frugal. Being only bring in one potion, that's not cool. I can't accept it. Otherwise, though, he's absolutely fantastic. Hope all of you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave me a like, share this content, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I will see you all in the next video. Take care.